How's it going, dude?
I'm good. How are you? Nice to
I'm
meet you.
fantastic. It's so nice to meet you too. This is awesome.
Yeah. You are in London, I presume, right?
Yes, indeed. That's the truth of the matter. I'm in my childhood music room, actually, hanging out.
This
This is where
is
I've been quarantined for the last 4 months or so.
this is the room of in my room.
It's the room within my room. That's correct.
Cool. Well, hopefully we get to get a little tour of you later. But for anyone just joining us, we are chatting with Jacob Collier. I know people on your side are joining, but for the Great Big Story side, he's a 26-year-old. 26, right? Did I get that right?
Just turned 26. That's
Just
correct.
turned
Yeah.
26. Well, happy birthday.
Thanks.
He's a multi-Grammy Award winner who has an album dropping tomorrow, his third studio album.
Fourth, and I
Fourth
actually think
studio
it's
album.
fourth.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's the third of the Jesse series.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. So we're going to be chatting with him about music, about harmony, which I know he's a big advocate for, and how he's been spending the COVID era and the days of lockdowns and the virus. And if anyone wants to put a question down below, we'll try to get to some questions later. So Jacob, you doing well?
I'm doing great, man. It's funny because a lot of people I think have had just trouble with this pandemic, and it's been really gnarly. But I'm so grateful for it. I'm so grateful for it. I think it's given me so much pause for thought. It's given me space to create stuff, and I've fallen in love with creating stuff that I've forgotten how to create because I was too busy before, and family time and all that stuff. So really, I'm doing good.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. I mean, your whole first album you did in your room by yourself, every single instrument, produced it, like the whole thing. So I imagine you're a person who does very well in your room.
I do. It's funny. I feel like I've been planning for this my whole life. I mean, yeah, this is the room I learned to sort of walk in as a 1 year old, and when I was about 7, I got a piece of recording software called Cubase, and then I so upgraded to Logic when I was 11, and so I've literally been recording in this room for over half my life. And I think for me, the exciting thing about a room in your home is that you can let things flow in a very natural way. You know, it doesn't feel like something that's a job. It feels like something which is like an extension of your own fascinations, which to me is cool. And so obviously, yeah, within the pandemic, I haven't really left this house, but you know, it's nice. I've got like a computer where I've been working on this chair, and there's just a bunch of instruments around the room, which I can show you later on if you'd like to see
Yeah.
them. But basically, it's definitely a fun room to be quarantined in, and I'm very very lucky to have it.
Yeah, I think we're all sort of learning a bit about our own spaces as we've sort of not been able to move around as freely. I know I've certainly got very acquainted with my apartment here in Brooklyn, and tried to make it my own. I guess, do you have any advice for people who are maybe stuck in their space? It seems like, even though you're in your room, you're able to sort of let your imagination run, even in a space. I mean, do you have any advice for people who are sort of stuck in their own, little rooms and little worlds?
Wow, yeah, that's a tricky one. Well, I guess I'd say don't resist it, because I think a lot of the pain of being stuck inside is that you want to change the fact that you're stuck inside. And I think for me, there was a bit at the beginning of like, but I really want to go on this tour. Like I had this tour planned for about 10 weeks. It was like across Europe and across the States. I was super excited. And it was like realizing, okay, so this is going to happen. And and I don't think I'm going to be able to go out and hang out with my friends, and I'm not going to be able to go and do this and that and listen to live concerts or do whatever. So I think that after I'd stopped trying to change it, I kind of embraced it, and I think that made it easier, which I know is a little bit of a kind of simple thing to say, but I think for me that there are so many joys that happen when you let yourself be still that just cannot be possible when you don't let yourself be still. And I also have the kind of brain that is never still. And so it's been even more of a challenge for me to really let like my threshold come right down where you can hear like the all of the quietest thoughts. And I think the quietest thoughts can teach you the most, and they can speak the loudest to your kind of value system. So I think for me it's been about letting those tides kind of rise and come up, and not be too afraid of them, and then learn how to kind of alchemize whatever forces are going on around the world, whether it's strange political things or whether it's crazy climate stuff or whether it's just like millions and millions of people having a disease. I think it's just been interesting to see and experiment with what happens when you turn on the creative tap in times like these.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. But yeah, let's start talking about the music. One thing, in digging up like interviews and stuff with you, I've noticed you're a big advocate for harmony. You've talked about harmony as a tool in a way that I haven't heard a lot of other musicians talk about. And I know, we have people joining from all over the world who probably have different levels of musical understanding. So if you want to give a little brief on like what is harmony and how it works with different musical elements like melody and rhythm, and sort of how people can appreciate it on the level that you use in your music.
Wow, it's a really good question, a hard question. So harmony, okay, so music, right? Music is a few different things, but three of the main forces within music are melody and rhythm and harmony. And if you have melody and rhythm and harmony and sound of some kind, then you have music. And so when I was a boy, I was really, really interested in the idea of putting different notes together. And that's essentially what harmony is. It's the relationship between notes. And so you take a note like D, right? I'm at my piano now. So it's a note like D. And then you say, okay, I'm going to add an E. Now it's two notes. So this is harmony. This is very exciting. You can keep on adding notes. F sharp, or there's an A, and there's a C, and there's an F, and there's an A flat, and there's a C sharp. So the more notes you add, it gets crunchier and crunchier and really, really exciting, kind of like interesting to understand. And so for me as a kid, I sat literally at this exact piano, and I used to experiment with, how do I take a song that I know and that I love and sort of recontextualize it harmonically? Because if you have a melody that works, right? Say like, I'm trying to think of a good example of a melody. Like Somewhere Over the Rainbow, right? Right. It's a beautiful song. And so you can sing the melody, that's fine. But if you're interested in harmony, what the cool thing is you can zoom into that and think, okay, so how can we harmonize this melody? How can we give it a story? How can we give it some kind of emotional direction? Because harmony is not just about stasis, it's most of all about movement. Chords want to move between each other. It's them in their natural state is moving and sort of orbiting a tonal gravity. And so one thing I realized when I was a kid is like, okay, so that you can have a key. Like I'm in the key of C major, and I can move the chords around, and I'm still in C major, kind of no matter what happens, because the gravity goes home, right? But then if I change key and I go, and then I'm in A major, right? It's like a whole new frontier. So I used to have so much fun, man. I can't even tell you, with just taking a song, right? What if this chord was minor, right? Or pretty crunchy chords or whatever. And I used to sit and I used to play these songs. I used to consider different chords. And you take a chord like C major, and you think if I add a B flat to the chord of C major, then it wants to change. It wants to move to there, right? Or if I add an F in C major, then you got the E and the F are rubbing against each other. And that's a really interesting sound. And I'd move one note at a time. And you can just kind of navigate all these different sounds. And I mean, I could go on and on for hours, but essentially, yeah, what harmony is it's what happens when you put different notes together, and the patterns that you find there, I find infinitely inspiring, musically talking.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I like you've talked about in the past is you sort of talk about harmony and songwriting and moving between these chords in the context of a journey and a story. And here at Great Big Story, where we're storytellers in the world of video and film, and now like podcasts and audio storytelling, but we're all about telling great stories. And I love the fact that you talk about, you can tell a story through lyrics. That's language, people understand that. But I love that you talk about, you have your melody, which people recognize, but then by changing those chords and changing the harmony underneath it, you can go to places in that story that you wouldn't normally, but you always end up coming back home. There's always an end to the story. Yeah. I don't know if you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of the sort of musical fascinations that I've gotten stuck in over the years are basically how do you create tension, and then how do you release tension, right? And it's the same with every great story, every great film, every great dance production, whatever. It's like, how do you state the characters, state the form, give a sense of context, and then move away from that context in some way, and then return back to somewhere you started, but where something has changed. Because if you end up exactly where you started, then the story was without worth or whatever. So I think for me, in terms of music, kind of musicality, it's just how do you depart from a place, right? And then how do you return to a place? So if I'm in C, if I go if I go somewhere over rainbow, way over, that feeling is different from way up high versus, right? So I've pivoted. There's a that I heard of once in a lullaby. And I've come back to C at the end, which is where I started. But
Yeah.
I've explored some of these different colors along the way. So I think, you know, essentially when the human ear hears sound or hears music in particular, it's like tension and like release. And so if you bottle everything down, almost every great piece of music is just basically, that's all it is, or normally, you know. And so that's a very unrefined way of making tension. It's just every single, like I'm just doing like, you know. But when you think about, you know, more kind of literate ways of making tension, even just, that's a little bit of tension, release, a bit more tension, release. More attention, and you can consistently do this, and obviously with harmony you can give context to all sorts of strange things. So, you know, if I play a melody, that melody can take me through chords, so I can say I'm starting here and I'm going to move here, and that's a really cool thing to explore. And all that really makes sense, all that really is important, is that the melody makes sense to the ear. I've gone to a new key here, but the melody still makes sense. When you get into jazz, it gets all chromatic and scary and stuff. But really, it's all about triads. Triad is a 3-note chord, and you can play triads all day long, just finding different sounds, different chords. And it's so inspiring when you start moving them around and storytelling with them, I guess.
Yeah, I love the idea of tension and release, because that same thing when you tell a story, right? You start somewhere, you have your conflict and your challenge, but then eventually you get to the end and there's a resolution and you've learned something. So I love the way that, you know, that's how you think about music, because I think it's the same thing. And I wanted to move on a little bit to talk about your new album. I know that, you know, like we said, your first album you did completely by yourself, every instrument, self-produced. But with this new album, with the singles you've released, you're bringing in a lot of, you know, collaboration. You're working with a lot of different artists. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how do you go from doing everything yourself, where you have complete control, and then moving to working with different artists. And, you know, if there's sort of a negotiation or a compromise there, because obviously everyone brings something different. And how do you sort of navigate that creative process?
Fantastic question. Yeah, there are so many different kinds of collaboration too. You're correct. I made an album called In My Room. I can show you. This is the album that's on my wall, and that room is this room. This is the floor, and then is the door. And so there's also instruments here. This is where I do a lot of the creation process. So there's some guitars up here, random stuff I've collected over the years, strange wacko instruments like the harpeggi, and this is a silbermond here, and so there's a Gnawa instrument called the gumbri here, and a tabla up there. All sorts of strange stuff. And for me, I got so excited as a kid just about designing these worlds alone. And I would be jamming with friends, and I'd be experimenting with, you know, like, yeah, playing with other musicians, writing for singers, stuff like that. But to me, I think just being Jacob, it was always when I came home, literally came home, that I started to really expand this palette of sounds, you know. And I was such a sponge as a kid, you know, and I loved to listen to all sorts of different kinds of musicians, you know, so from jazzers to classical people to rock and roll guys to rappers and trappers and hip hoppers and fiddlers and Northumbrian pipers and rock guitarists, everything. And I think with Jesse, this quadruple album that I've been cooking up, the goal was almost to describe this whole, the entirety of my musical universe in terms of taste, like with one through line. In order to do this, I realized that I needed these 4 distinct kind of worlds to operate within. So Jesse Volume 1 was this big orchestral space, kind of a huge acoustic space. Jesse Volume 2 was a more cozy, smaller space, more like folk music and songwriting and world music and stuff like that. Jesse Volume 3, which comes out at midnight, is almost about negative space. It's like what happens when the whole idea of acoustic sound is confounded, it's expounded, it explodes. And across the whole of the journey, I knew I wanted to depart from the idea of working alone, and I wanted to work with other people. But I figured that, I mean, I've always loved a challenge, and I wanted to dump myself right in the deepest possible waters of what collaboration really meant. And so that meant, like, I did all of the orchestration for Jesse Volume 1 for the orchestra. I arranged all that stuff. And it meant that for Jesse Volume 2, I traveled all around. I mean, I'm trying to think of where I've been to in this whole journey. It's been kind of wild, but like over to Morocco to record with this guy, Hamid El Kastri. And he's an interesting example. He was on Jesse Volume 1, and he doesn't speak a word of English. And so the story that we kind of crafted together wasn't based on verbal communication. It was based on almost like on feeling. And that was a really interesting lesson for me, because I went in with these ideas that I could articulate with words, as being someone who loves words, but not necessarily musically in that way. You know, I sort of went in, I was thinking, okay, it's this and this, but he didn't understand me. So it was this process of thinking, okay, so how can we build a bridge in terms of the sound here that means that we can both find like a dialogue, and we did it, and it was super cool when we did it. Nice. The same is true for a musician called Umu Sangare, who was on Jesse Volume 2, and she's a Malian singer, one of the greatest Malian singers of all time. I don't know if you know her, but she's just amazing. And so that was another process where, yeah, she actually came over to this very room. She like sat on this stool, and yeah, not a word of English, but I managed to find this dialogue with her by saying, hey, what do you think about this? But not saying it, playing it, you know. And then she had an idea, and then that idea led to a new idea, and it all kind of happened like that. But it's a really interesting time to collaborate, because obviously there's so much you can do remotely. I mean, almost all of Jesse Volume 3 was recorded remotely, you know. Oh, wow. So, for example, there's a song I released called All I Need, which features Mahalia and Ty Dolla $ign, which is one of my favorites on the album. And that song was, I mean, I wrote it kind of over Christmas. And I realized that I wanted this, you know, some collaborator there who was super unpretentious and super gorgeous vocally, and could bring a kind of a real sensitivity and a youthness to the song. And I knew Mahalia was my girl for that. And so the whole of the process of like calling her up and asking if she was up for it, and then her recording it, all happened remotely. So I was sitting here at home, she was sitting there at home, like not far from here. She like lives up the road, but we couldn't hang out. So she sent that you know, that stuff in remotely. Same was true for Ty Dolla $ign and Kiana Lede and T-Pain, all these guys on the album. And for me, it's just been incredible to, I mean, just to discover how liquid that concept is nowadays. You know, you can collaborate with anyone in numerous ways, and every single collaborator has taught me something, you know, something brand new. And one thing I found to be true is that whatever certainties I walk into a scenario with tend to just close doors when you're in the scenario, because what's more exciting is thinking, okay, so this was a basic idea, like a kind of a wheelhouse for my idea, but then when we're together, it's going to evolve and change and might be completely ripped up, and we can start from scratch. And that always gives me goosebumps. It's like, oh, this is cool. We're really evolving the thing together. And yeah, having been someone who's used to, as you say, a lot of control on the process, and you know, I play all the instruments on the albums, and I do the arranging, and I engineer the sessions and produce it all myself and mix it and stuff. Just having somebody else's DNA is super refreshing, because it's like, oh, great. Now we can bounce off each other. And I'm used to wearing all the different hats in the process and saying, Jacob, don't do this. And then Jacob says, I want to do this. And I say, no, Jacob, you can't, you know. So those kinds of self-dialogues get exhausting sometimes. And I think that working with others is a really nice way of alleviating that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, talking about, you know, working with music in the digital age and in ways that, you know, even just a few years ago would have been, unheard of, the fact that you get to work remotely. But you also got started in the digital age making like split screen YouTube videos. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the visual components of your work, because obviously, you know, that's a huge part. And I know you just did the Late Show, and you did, you know, you're the same way that you've been doing your YouTube videos, and you're sort of a step ahead of a lot of other artists, because you've been doing this for so long. And now, you know, you're sort of being able to do that on network television. Yeah, I wonder if you could talk about, you know, how you use those visual components, whether it's live or whether it's through your YouTube channel and sort of split screen and you playing all those different instruments in different corners of the screen. Yeah, is that something that you think about beforehand, or does that sort of come after?
Really good questions. Yeah, I suppose I kind of got my start in terms of my career, even though it didn't feel like a career, it just felt like me mucking around. But I got my start with my sister's iPad and my SM58 microphone and my computer, which was over there at the time. and just these great big harmonies and great big ideas, and I would arrange songs. And so I got a lot of my compositional skills from arranging. And that process of visualizing the sounds was one I really fell in love with. And I've always loved, sort of organizing spaces, and I've always loved symmetry and putting things together, these intricate mosaics that fit and they become one whole. It's very, very appealing to me. And so I think for me it was cool as a teenager just to realize that it was like just possible at that moment. It was just possible because it was almost impossible. In fact, when I started trying to do the split screen thing, I was doing it in iMovie, and it was really inefficient because I'd be exporting from iMovie a fresh video every time I wanted to make a new one, and it would degrade the quality every time. So by the end, it would be like this pixel thing. It really didn't work out. And so I managed to get my hands on Final Cut Express way back before I now use Premiere Pro. But the process of these little screens, little Jacobs interacting with each other, playing different instruments, and building these grooves up and stuff like that was one that I really enjoyed because there's so much depth in it. It's not just set up a camera and sing. It's actually if you want it to feel human, it takes a lot of consideration, I think, to do that, because it's not as easy as it looks to make a collection of videos feel like really natural. And a lot of things I see look kind of dull. And it's like, okay, so there's that and there's that, but where's the connection? And so I think for me, not in a conscious way, just in an unconscious way, led by my kind of gut, I was like, how do I get this to be meaningful and not to be this gimmick? And I would say the same is true for all knowledge, like any kind of harmonic knowledge or rhythmic knowledge or musical knowledge, full stop, or even knowledge about life as a human being. It's like, how do I disregard my knowledge without removing it in a creative process? And so with the process of organizing things on the screen, that was just like, it was like a different outlet for that same aesthetic of lots of things layering up, feeling good with each other and between each other, and sort of interacting, and then getting to the point where that felt not like something separate from the music, but something that was a natural extension of it, And so whereas at first it would be like record the music, finish it off, then make the video, I think at this point it's almost like, oh, I've got this like video idea, maybe I should make a song for it, I think, and that's the nice thing about a skill set advancing in a sort of organic way, is that things can happen when they're meant to happen, and it all feels like one gesture. It doesn't feel like, oh, now I've got to go and have lessons as a piano player and as a bass player or as a video editor. It's like I'm just kind of feeling my way through, and as someone who's been very highly self-taught throughout my life, I believe wholeheartedly in the idea of building yourself a space and a set of values by making stuff and by experimenting with stuff, and then the idea of visualizing them on a screen. I mean, I guess it just happened at the right moment for like the music industry, because then everyone started to be reliant upon that. But what's been crazy in the last 4 months, as you were saying, is like all these late night TV shows can't have guests in the studio, so they almost rely upon the not just musical but visual creativity of artists around the world. And I've been set these challenges. I did this like NPR Tiny Desk, for example, where I had sort of 4 different Jacobs in a room, which is something I've done hundreds of times before, except this time they weren't in screens. They were actually in different parts of the room, and they were talking to each other and playing with each other, not just talking at each other or playing at each other. They were connecting, and that process was really hard because it's very easy to mask videos, say like I'm going to draw a line here and I'll put Jacob here and they'll be playing, but that's not connected, and it's not connective to an audience. And so it's better if they can look at each other and be aware of each other and play off each other, and all of that process. I think it just comes from having had a lot of experience in trying to get these digital experiences, which really I don't love that much. I much prefer real life in most ways. How to get them to feel like they can ignite like a real spark in the air, like a real thing in somebody's brain. And it doesn't just pull them into the screen, it pulls them out of the screen, and that's always the challenge when it comes to being visual for me.
Yeah. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, we're sort of in this phase where people are relying on video communication in a way because we can't gather in spaces. These shows can't have guests in the studios. And you're someone who has sort of been on the forefront of using technology in your music. What do you see, where do you see the industry going? I think it's been said that, music venues will probably be some of the last places to open, as a result of the virus, because it's just tons of bodies crammed into a space,
Bad ideas. Yeah.
I mean, what do you see going forward, and what do you hope to see once the music industry, both live and recorded, is able to sort of, crawl out of this phase?
Well, I think everything's going to change, and I think people are realizing already that the way in which we need to communicate and create stuff, it needs to change, and it's changing. I think it's kind of speeding up a lot of things that were kind of inevitably going to happen already, but that just are happening sooner. Like I'd be surprised, for example, if like even some major companies go back to working in offices just because people can work from home now, and it's like, well, why would you go into the office then and whatever? So I think in terms of musicality, I think there'll be a few things. One, I think, is that people will return to the real world with sharpened technical tools, but will need to be reminded not to use them. Um, and another is that people will crave live. I think people will crave live, but like live experiences in a new way, because as I'm sure you know, and I definitely know, there's only so many Zoom calls you can take, and then like the fatigue sets in, and you know there's only so many sort of live stream concerts you can take where it's just like one camera and the guys, you can't really see him and he's blurry and blah blah, or you know, classes online. I think people are really trying to seek new ways of connecting with each other, and I sort of foresee this explosion of live energy when we do come out of this crazy period of time, where people learn how to be with each other in brand new ways and stuff like that. And as far as technology is concerned, for me, I mean, I toured the whole world twice with this one-man show right after My Room came out, because I wanted to tour the album as I recorded it, which is basically like me and the room of music instruments. And you know, there was all this technology on stage. You know, like behind me, for example, there was this. Well, there's a screen, and then we had these Xbox cameras around the stage, and so you had multiple Jacobs being like, I mean, essentially appearing on stage around me using this screen and these cameras that were live looping as I made these grooves. So I would play a bass line, walk away from the bass, and play the drums, but the Jacob bass player would still be there on stage on the screen, and so all this kind of technological stuff was there, and I invented and created an instrument called the vocal harmonizer, which means you can sing a note and play a bunch of notes on the keyboard, and you hear all the notes I'm playing on the keyboard sung by my voice live. So it's like an instantaneous choir. And the job of all these instruments and technologies and things is, how do you get them to extend the humanity of the thing that's going on there, rather than take it over or kind of distract from it, or detract from it, whatever. It's a very interesting challenge, because a lot of technology is very distracting. It's like, it's the thing it's best at doing. It's like beep, 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 you know. And so I sort of foresee musicians struggling a little bit with the interaction between technology and music, but I think there'll be this, as I say, this upsurgence of love for things that are not digital and not screen-based and not reliant upon internet connections. And I think that will probably be really therapeutic for the music industry, because obviously we've been on this sort of technological rise for a long, long time, and now it's been like whoosh, sort of exponentially increased. And I think I foresee a sort of like coming back down to the ground thing, but with all these sharpened skills that people can use in order to, you know, pull things off remotely and communicate without being in the same room with each other on whole new scales, you know.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that time when we get to, you know, put away the screens once again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you? So I think you were going to play a song for us, but do you have a few minutes? The chat is like blowing up. So I wonder if you have a few minutes to answer some questions.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah.
That some folks have, if you have time.
Yeah.
We got a question here about the name of your volumes.
Oh, yeah.
Jesse, 4 volumes coming eventually, right?
4 volumes, yeah.
Tomorrow.
So, exactly, yeah. So it's pronounced Jesse, and essentially I wanted to forge a character for the journey. Like I wanted it to feel like the journey would have like, yeah, some kind of some spirit at the forefront of it that was leading the way. Jesse, I've always loved the name Jesse. I added the D at the beginning to make it really annoying in interviews and to stimulate questions like why is Jesse spelled in such a weird way, which is obviously working. But yeah, I wanted to set out on this journey, and I wanted some kind of character. It's also a bit like JC, which is me. I'm JC. I'm Jacob Collier. So like JC, Jesse, it all fell into place.
Nice. We have another question here about writer's block. Do you ever get it, and how do you overcome it? And do you have any advice for people who are trying to create?
Yeah, that's tricky. Everyone goes through it. Everyone experiences writer's block to a certain point in their life. I think once again, it's almost about trying to dissolve the reasons why you're doing something. For me, I have the biggest writer's block when there's a reason that I have to do something, like I'm doing it to impress someone or to make a bunch of money or to whatever it happens to be. That's when I get blocked, because there's a sort of stipulation or like an agenda. And I think for me, a really fun thing is just to remove all of those boundaries and try and create in a sort of new boundless way. And one other thing I would say that's been helpful advice to me is try inverting all of your intentions. And say, you know, if you want to write something that's X or Y, then flip it and do something that's the opposite. Or if you're recording a song and you want there to be more layers, then take away some layers. And if you want there to be more loudness, then make everything quieter. And I think those kinds of experiments, of creative experiments, can be really cool and really sort of educational and teach you about your tastes. But one of the greatest remedies I find is just time. You know, sometimes you have to walk away from something, and 5 years later you walk back and you realize what it was all about.
Right. I love that. Do the opposite of your instinct, right? If you always write something loud, maybe try something quiet. I love
Right.
that.
Yeah, and I feel like what was I going to say? I forgot. No worries.
um, you don't have to answer this one, but I thought it was funny. Do you have a least favorite genre of music? Your music blends so many things, from funk and soul and jazz and rock and everything. Is there anything that you just don't want to touch?
I don't know. I think I've never thought in terms of genre. It's always been really weird to me, the idea of genre. Like, there's definitely music I prefer, like some music I prefer to other kinds of music. But you can have brilliant everything, and you can have non-brilliant everything as well. And so I think it's just about following the stuff that you like. I mean, yeah, I'm not sure I can say like there's this one genre like I just can't stand it, but I can, you know, I can think of examples of everything: jazz, folk, rock and roll, electronic music, dubstep, K-pop, everything. I can think of examples that I don't like, and I can also think of examples that I love. So I hope that we'll be led towards some kind of genre-free world where we're like not segregated and put into these different boxes. That's what I'm hoping for in the industry.
Nice. We're gonna go into one more music nerd question: negative harmony. I know we started this Instagram out with you, you know, kind of giving us a quick music theory 101 with harmony. But yeah, I wonder if you can give us a quick little blurb on negative harmony.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, I see the viewer count going up now. So, okay, how can I explain this very simply? Harmony is about movement. It's about momentum and movement. And so, if you have an axis, like a harmonic axis, it's important to learn how to invert it from time to time. It's a bit like the choices thing. Like, I want to do something, but I'm going to do the opposite. So in music, if you cadence to somewhere, say I want to go to D major. So there are a few ways to get into D major. One is to go A to D. It's very classical. And so there's this axis that exists within some great minds within the world of music, people who've been interested in symmetry for a long, long time, people like Steve Coleman and Ernst Levy. And these guys came up with axes where you can flip all of the momentum and arrive at the chord of D major, for example, from this opposite place, this negative world. And so if you flip A7, then it ends up being like a G minor 6 sound, but actually all of the voice leading, by which I mean notes wanting to go to other notes, being led, that's all equivalent because it's like a reflection. And so that to me was like mind-blowing and really cool and exciting for quite a long time when I was younger, because I felt like, oh, everything I know about harmony, all these arrival points can be inverted and flipped. And so a chord like, yeah, B flat 7 to E flat can suddenly be this sound. And it's like such a joyous, kind of like warm, almost like sentimental feeling. So really, it's useful as an idea up until it gives you and up until it gives you ideas yourself, you know. And so for me, I'm always on the lookout for like interesting harmonies and ways in which you can think about harmony and stuff. But like theories are useless until you start creating with them, like utterly useless. And I really didn't like music theory much as a kid. In fact, not until I was about 19 or 20 did I get into it, because I started to make up my own words for stuff and find my own names and all this kind of stuff. And I think I would really encourage people who are watching, you know, if you like harmony and you like stuff in music, not to get too bogged down in these concepts like, you know, negative harmony, positive harmony, and subdivisions and microtonal, whatever, because it's much more about the whole storytelling thing. But if you're interested in the storytelling thing and you give it patience, some of these ideas can be totally confounding and totally revolutionary. And I found something like negative harmony to be such a cool tool. Just when it occurs to you, like when you're playing, even unconsciously at this point, it's like I'm in a key and I'm moving around in a key, and suddenly I can move somewhere else. And I got to that because my brain can feel blindly around and discover a sound that it would have been placed into my mind in a conscious way at some point, but ends up being this subconscious thing, because it's like much more about it's about this flipping of the thing. So yeah, I enjoy inverting like loads of stuff. I'm an inverter.
Right.
So, yeah, so the idea of like negative harmony was very appealing when I was studying music.
Awesome, cool. We got some nice music theory lessons from Jacob today. Well, Jacob, if you have a little time, I know you're at your piano. Well, you're also surrounded by like 100 instruments, but if you could give us a little taste of what's on your album that's releasing tomorrow, I think the folks watching would really love it.
Yeah, let's do it. So
Okay.
yeah, my album is called Jesse Volume 3. It's good. I do quite like it. And I would recommend you check it out at midnight if you'd like to. I'm going to play a song from it called All I Need, which is the one I was talking about earlier on. All I Need, actually, it broke my record for the number of simultaneous tracks in my musical Logic software.
Nice. How many was
646.
that?
646 is a lot. lot of tracks. And so, but it can also be performed on the piano in this way. So I'll do that. But Dave, thanks so much for having me. This has been like
Yeah,
super,
man,
super
this
fun.
has been great. Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, no worries. This is All I Need. The way that I feel when you put your arms over me. I love the way that you get in the groove when you walk with me. Every time I think about it, can't stop thinking about it. You were all I need. So I'll be singing in the star bright underneath the moonlight. Cause I love your smile and it makes me feel alright, alright. I'll sing to the sun, you will always be the one for me. Let your love shine down, let your love shine down. Every time I think about it, can't stop thinking about it. Oh, no, no, no. You are all I need. I'm seeing the star bright underneath the moonlight. Oh, I love your smile and it makes me feel alright. I will sing it to the sun. You will always be the one for me. Let your love shine down. Let your love shine down. Sing it to the sun, you will always be the one for me. Let your love shine down. Let your love shine down. La 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 la. Shine on, shine on down.
Woo! Oh, that was incredible.
Thank you.
Such a treat.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you, man. Well, I'm really looking forward to the album dropping tomorrow. I know everyone else in the chat is also, and the rest of the world. And man, we really appreciate you taking some time. I know it's a big day for you, so thanks
Yeah,
for
thanks, Dave. Yeah,
having me.
thanks for having me. Thanks everyone for tuning in. This has been lovely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Check out the album at midnight and see you all very soon, I hope.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jacob.
See you, Dave. Thanks,
All
Omi.
right.
Bye.
I'll see you later.